In August of 2024, David Lynch used his social media to confirm what had been rumored for some time. He had pulmonary emphysema, and that, at his 78 years old, left him in a more than delicate position. As expected, the media wanted to know more about it, and with absolute patience, this man who for years was in charge of promoting transcendental meditation, dedicated himself to elaborating on the matter. He said he loved tobacco and that he would always love it. That smoking and smelling a cigarette were for him things linked to pleasure. However, the price for that taste had been high and he had no choice but to pay it. He said that he had been fighting his addiction for the last 2 years, and that he had even seen some of his other vices grow considerably. Since he had quit smoking, his daily cups of coffee had increased. He spoke in a soft tone, downplaying the fact that this was the inevitable prelude to a foretold end. There was a hint of regret in his voice when he clarified that pulmonary emphysema didn't allow him to move much, and that there were few things he could do without depending on an oxygen tube. Sadly, this kept him away from the place where he had known how to shine and leave his mark, the filming sets. However, he immediately added that this did not mean he was retiring. He said it was impossible to retire or quit for someone like him. He said he would continue to immerse himself in his thoughts to try to bring wonderful things from there, as he had always done. Many were then excited about the possibility of seeing one of his movies again, something that would not end up happening, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. How did David Lynch become such a proponent? Why was he considered one of the last film directors with a truly unique stamp? What controversies surrounded his works? Why was he accused of abusing his daughter and killing his friend? To answer these and other questions, let's go back to January 16, 2025, the day David Lynch died. Before being acclaimed by some and labeled as weird and incomprehensible by others, David Lynch was a child who knew how to enjoy a nomadic life surrounded by wildlife. He was born on January 20th, 1946, and due to his father's profession, a scientist attached to the US Department of Agriculture, he and his mother were dragged into several moves. Going back and forth had its consequences on the little one's character. The absence of a stable bond with other boys his age resulted in the disproportionate growth of his imagination. Since loneliness presented itself as a faithful ally from the early years, David became prone to taking long walks among the trees and somewhat wild areas. He quickly became interested in the colors that the vegetation took on at certain hours of the afternoon, in the tones that could be seen in rotting fruits, and in the texture of dead animals. With sublime respect, he approached each of the mysteries of nature and set his eye upon them. There was something in that silent cycle of life that was much more appealing to him than the world of practical meanings and words. Encouraged by a friend of his father, he entered the world of painting and believed he found there a passion that moved him. David was a Boy Scout. He earned a few pesos as an usher at the inauguration of President John F. Kennedy, and at 18, he went to Europe in order to study and professionalize with a mythical expressionist painter. But for some reason he returned home after 15 days. While it is true that he never stopped painting, it is equally true that everything changed for him one dawn when he was in front of his easel, coloring a night landscape. At that moment, a storm broke out outside. David watched fascinated as the visuals in front of his eyes and the sound of the storm formed a unique and captivating ensemble. He knew then that he wanted to bring his images to life. The next step was to get a camera. The rest is history. The first thing David Lynch made clear was that he was not interested in joining any trend that was in fashion. He was not interested in the fast pace at which the film industry of the late 60s was beginning to understand the seventh art. He didn't want to hear about the magic formulas that others claimed to have, and was even less interested in oiling that machinery that was so effective, but sometimes desensitized. Lynch made it clear from the beginning with his works and his own manifestos that he was not interested in providing works that could contain a single meaning. He always emphasized that his vision was his own and complex, that his universes were only accessible to those who had the will to take the step and explore them. It became customary and almost a joke that everyone would ask him what he meant by this or that film. He never gave in to the impulse to unravel his creations, which he presented as living experiences. His experimental cinema, closer to the unconscious and tangentially opposed to classic narrative techniques, soon made him an extravagant and striking figure. But what interested everyone the most was that despite creating uncomfortable environments and dark atmospheres, David managed to connect with people. In this way, the awards soon came to him, and by the early 70s, the man decided that cinema would be his guide. His first and surreal feature film, Eraserhead, quickly arrived, leaving everyone astounded. The film features a creature that, according to legend, would have been made from the fetus of a cow. The film got little distribution but quickly became a cult classic. Without anyone seeing it coming, specialized cinemas began to fight over it, and it became common for heated debates about the work to be held after the screening. That was already a great milestone. No one imagined that a few years later the successes would double. Such was the stir of Eraserhead that sooner rather than later Lynch was hired to make his first commercial release. And so it was that he got the chance to portray the life of Joseph Carey Merrick, an English citizen who became famous due to the terrible malformations he suffered from the age of 1.5. The movie that would come out of this would be The Elephant Man, a film that garnered 8 Oscar nominations, including Best Director and Best Adapted Screenplay for Lynch. Believing that after that Lynch would start to stick to established norms, he was hired to adapt Dune, a science fiction novel by writer Frank Herbert. It was expected that it would lead a large franchise, and they made this known to the budding director. He agreed, as long as he was given the green light for a project where he had creative freedom. The summary of that is that Dune was a failure, and his subsequent project, Blue Velvet, became an instant icon of pop culture. It was clear that Lynch was an untamed genius and that his work was more fruitful when he was given free rein. Even so, many were afraid of what could come out of his head, and he spent some years without being able to get a contract. Some suspected that perhaps this was the unexpected and rushed end of his days as a creator, but then a television project came into his hands that would change everything. Twin Peaks premiered on American Broadcasting Company on April 8, 1990, and gradually won over a huge audience. The story presented an unconventional police drama, with extensive scenes loaded with dialogue. The subplot was disturbing, the mysteries captivating, and the dreamlike aesthetic of some situations caused a stir rarely seen before. Thanks to all this, Lynch appeared in Time magazine and his image went around the world. He had everyone at his feet, but his ideas were still not fully accepted, and when they wanted to impose an ending on the series, he let go of the project's helm, ready to seek new adventures. He won a Palme d'Or with Wild at Heart, where he worked with Nicolas Cage and made a movie about Twin Peaks that was hated by many of his followers and critics. That of course did not stop him. By this point, Lynch already knew that he could move forward without the need to be complacent. Lost Highway premiered in 1997 and not only captivated the audience again with its non-linear plot full of meanings, but also because its soundtrack included several bands that were popular among the younger ones like Marilyn Manson or Rammstein. This made Lynch, who was 50, approach the new generations who adopted him as a new reference. Followed by The Straight Story, Mulholland Drive, and many more awards, more divided opinions, and a few other projects. Meanwhile, Lynch worked on documentaries, commercials, paintings, comic strips for newspapers, and musical compositions. When the internet finally took over the world, Lynch didn't stop to make thoughtful analysis about the future of cinema, like many of his contemporaries. He promptly began creating web series. When cell phones started coming with better cameras and everyone was ranting about it, he filmed an entire movie in digital format. A sort of extensive and recursive nightmare called Inland Empire. Lynch was still Lynch, but raised to the nth power. His universe was still his, but redefined. Years of independent creation had given him the opportunity to build a very personal mythology to which he had never renounced. A mythology that for many can be appreciated in all its splendor in this film. A mythology that could mutate and mount on any external change. It remains to say that Lynch was already a master by then. Perhaps tired of being asked where his ideas came from, he spoke about his fondness for transcendental meditation in his book, Catch the Golden Fish. He clarified that for him, creating was akin to fishing. To catch big fish, you have to go to deeper and deeper waters. He also opened a foundation that funds everything from spiritual research to social causes, gave lectures, and continued to pour his heart into the most diverse formats. In 2015, he experienced a difficult period when a Twin Peaks actor discovered the director hadn't called him for the series' return. This actor, Michael J. Anderson, did not take this well and decided to attack Lynch on social media. First, he accused him of boring people with his movies, but then he went a bit further, saying that Lynch had abused one of his own daughters and had ordered the killing of one of his best friends out of ambition. Lynch's daughter defended her father, saying the allegations were unfounded. A few years later, he stopped appearing live with a cigarette in his mouth. He had quit smoking. That's when rumors that he was sick began to fill everything. And that brings our story full circle. On January 16, 2025, Lynch's family used the acclaimed director's social media to make the following statement. With deep sorrow, we, his family, announce the passing of the man and artist David Lynch. There is a big hole in the world now that he is no longer with us, but as he used to say, keep your eyes on the donut and not on the hole. Lynch's departure meant the loss of a director who didn't need to boast. He knew how to remain on the edges of an increasingly aggressive system, and conviction reduces certain artistic expressions to a reproducible model. To grasp his philosophy, perhaps it suffices to quote the end of his book. I would like to say, I deeply love cinema. I adore fishing for ideas and I love to meditate. I am excited to stimulate unity and I believe that stimulating unity brings a better life. Perhaps enlightenment is still far away, but it is said that as you walk towards the light, with each step you take, things shine brighter. For me, each day is better, and I believe that stimulating unity in the world will bring peace to this earth. So peace to all. In a world where more and more is sought to entertain, a man dedicated to moving from the strange, from the unconventional, from the periphery and from the freak is a rarity in itself. A beautiful rarity, and above all, necessary.